Learning target number 9. And we're going to call this part 1 because they're going to be 2 parts. We're separating it into 2 parts. I can solve absolute value equations. Now, you're probably looking at this thinking, great, it's more solving equations. I'm good at that. Okay? Absolute value. I know what that is. I remember what that is. But let's just do a quick little review of what absolute value is. So if I were to say, take -5, and absolute value is when you see those things, right? Those bars. People will call them bars. And the absolute value of 5, somehow, or -5, somehow everybody, even 7th graders, are able to tell me it's 5. They have no understanding or explanation why it's 5. They just know it's 5. That you take the negative sign away. And that's not good enough. You need to know that. So the actual definition of absolute value of a number is the distance that a number is away from what? 0. You got it. Okay? So -5 is 5 spaces away from 0, right? And because literally if I was just to stand on here and hop, it would take me 5 hops to get back to 0. Okay? Now, however, when I teach absolute value for the first time and then I say, okay, what's the absolute value of +5? What do you think their first instinct is to say? -5. Because they say, well, you're at 5 and to get to 0 you have to move backwards. But this word right here is pretty important, and distance can never be a negative number or a negative value. No, walking backwards does not undo the fact that you're moving. You're still moving, right? So the absolute value of 5 is 5. So they kind of get absolute value confused with opposites, right? So don't do that. Don't make that mistake. So that's the first thing you need to understand. So when we put a little different spin on it, in algebra, because in algebra we like variables, if I were to say, what could x be? X could be what? 3 or -3. Because 3 has an absolute value of 3, and so does -3. So here's one way to write it. X could equal -3 or +3, but you will sometimes see it written like this. Have you ever seen it written like that? It just means that it could be a positive or a negative. You can get fancy and write it that way. If they're not comfortable with that, then you don't need to. Okay? So you agree that when we're dealing with absolute value, we have 2 answers, right? A positive answer and a negative answer. Okay, because we really need to understand that in order to do this lesson. So if I get a little more detailed and say to you, we're going to solve this one using some common sense. So here's the deal with this. I want whatever this expression in here is to be simplified down to either what? 8 or -8. Because aren't those the only 2 numbers that will give me that absolute value? Yes? So I'm looking at what I'm starting with. Then I look in here and say, I need this expression to be 8 or -8. What's one of the values that x could be to give me that? 5. The most obvious one. If x is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8. 8. The absolute value of 8 is 8. The other one's a little trickier, and I heard Emma say it a little bit earlier. What is it? You said it. -11, right? Think about that. Oh, I saw you say 11. You maybe just forgot the negative. So if I take a look at this, and this one takes a little more thought, because to get this to equal -8, wouldn't that have to be a -11? Okay, so that one's a little trickier because -11 is x, and that plus 3 is -8, right? And the absolute value of -8 is 8. Okay, did you get that? So here's the deal with this. Some people's brain works that way, and some people doesn't. It doesn't for. So there's always some type of go-to formula in algebra to help you, right? When your brain doesn't work that way. So I'm going to show you that way. So what you're going to do is take this. You're going to take your x plus 3, the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 8. And you're going to say this to yourself. So there's a little bit of logic that you do have to apply. So let's look at it this way. Well, I know that I want this x plus 3 And this x plus 3 could equal a positive 8. But the x plus 3 could also equal a negative 8. Didn't you hear me say that? I said this x plus 3 could equal 8. Or this x plus 3 could equal a negative 8. So there's your two equations that you solve. So whenever you are solving an absolute value equation, they're kind of tricking you because you're not solving one equation, you're solving two every single time. You're solving it, one, as is, and two, with the negative. So you're always going to have one positive and the other the negative. And it's kind of like really easy because the first one that you come up with is, watch, if I were to just do this, isn't that my first equation? So I want you to just literally take this and make it your first equation. So this becomes just that, and then the x plus 3 equals the negative 8. Don't change the x plus 3. That remains the same. It's the fact that it could equal 8 or a negative 8. And now watch what happens when I do that. I get my 5, like you guys said, and I get my negative 11, like I thought Emma said. Okay? Got it? So this is a surefire way to get it without having to rack your brain and go, ooh, boy, how does that work? All right, let's do another one. Let's take a minus 2 equals 7. So just for the heck of it, see if you can figure it out without doing any fancy formulas. What are the values that a could equal? Give me 2 of them. There's only 2. Because what do I need that parenthesis to equal? Or not parentheses, that expression there. Yeah, it could be 9. A could be 9 because I want the parenthesis to equal 7 or negative 7. I need the whole expression. Once the value you choose for A is put in and 2 is subtracted from it, it needs to equal 7 or negative 7. So one of the values could be 9 because 9 minus 2 is 7. What could the other one be? Negative 5, right? You seeing it now? Okay. Okay, because look, negative 5 minus 2, and a lot of people kind of get confused because they're like, no, a negative 5 minus 2, that's negative 7. I know, but what's the absolute value of negative 7? 7. Got it? So let's write our 2 equations, though, just to kind of show you, because the next problem I'm going to show you, you're probably not going to be able to just look at them and tell. So I want the parentheses or the expression could equal a positive 7, or the expression inside could equal a negative 7. So I always want you to see that you're going to have your one positive value. I should use green and pink, red and green, and one negative. Got it? And so watch. When I add 2 here and here, I get one of my values. And when I add 2 here and here, I get my other value. Good? Okay, so far so good. Not too bad, right? So what happens when I start to build these equations up a little bit inside? Okay, so we always start with one step, then we move to 2-step, which really isn't going to be too big of a deal because you do the same thing. So this one's a little harder. I might look at this one and say, first of all, what do I need the whole expression to equal? I need it to either equal 12 or negative 12. So I need to have, because I'm subtracting 6 from it, and 18 minus 6 is 12. So I need this to equal 18, which means you may not know off the top of your head what that is, which is why you've spent enough time already thinking about it. Just use your equations and solve for it. So I want the 4x minus 6 to either equal positive 12, or I want the 4x minus 6 to equal negative 12. Try to stay consistent here so you can visualize. So one of them is always going to be the positive, and one of them is going to be the negative. And now you have 2 little baby equations that you've been solving in your sleep, right? So if I were to add 6 to here and here, just like we said, 4x equals 18, and then just divide both sides by 4, and x is equal to, you could either reduce it and make it 9 over 2, which is the same as 4 1/2. which you may not have known that 4 times 4.5 is 18. If you think about it, you'll understand why, right? Because 4 times 4 is 16 with 2 more halves, okay? But it may not be something that pops into your head immediately. And I know you're comfortable solving equations. So 4x is equal to negative 6. Divide by 4, especially when you, so this could equal negative 3 over 2 or negative 1.5. And you may not have come up with those numbers in your head on your own, right? Yeah. So, do you understand that process and why we make one positive and one negative? Because absolute value has 2 of those. Okay, so then after 1 step and 2 step, we add some multi-step, right? 3 times 2x minus 7 minus 5 equals 4. Okay, you have a couple different options here, and there is not one way that's better than the other. There's one way that's a little easier than the other. Because what is your first instinct? Your first thing to think about is this. What did you notice in all of the equations that I had given you so far? There was nothing outside. And now we got 2 things outside. So before you can go and set up your 2 separate equations, you have to get rid of that stuff. And so what is your first instinct to get rid of? In all your years of experience with equations, you should look at what and say, I need that gone first. Right? Don't we cancel out those constants first? So let's start by adding 5 to both sides. That's going to give me 3 times 2x minus 7 equals 9. Okay, now here's where you have a different option. You heard me say 3 times the quantity, the absolute value of 2x minus 7, which means technically you could distribute. Okay, you could. However, that's going to give you a 6x and a negative 21, which is bigger than 2 and 7. So if you like working with bigger numbers, go for it. If you don't, what is your other option? If something is being multiplied by something, how can you get rid of it? By gone. Okay? So, it's so much easier. So now you still have your 2x minus 7. They didn't blow up to 6 and 21. Equals 3. Got it? And so now I'm back to the 2-step equation where I now create the fact that I could have my 2x minus 7 equaling a positive 3, or I could have my 2x minus 7 equaling a negative 3. And once you get it to this part, you're kind of home free, aren't you? Because you can fly through these without, having to do too much. So we're going to add 7 actually to all 4 here. So this is going to be 2x equals 10, divide by 2. So one of your x's could be 5, and your other one could be 2. Okay? Just for the heck of it, I'm just going to show you that you could have done the absolute value of 6x minus 21 equaled 9. And then you would get 6x minus 21 equals 9. Or 6x minus 21 equaled negative 9. No, I don't. I mean, unless you think, I really would rather do it that way instead. Yeah.
4 would choose.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sometimes I talk too fast. So watch. Here I'm adding 21, and 6x equals 30. Divide by 6. Don't I still get 5? But I would rather divide 10 by 2 than 30 by 6. Is it going to kill you? No. It's not going to be that much harder. You guys can handle it. But why if you have the ability to cancel it? So just know that. Just get rid of it. Okay? Easy enough? All right. That is solving absolute value equations.